We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome to Liberty Nation News right here on the Radio America Network, coming at you from the flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Henry David Thoreau wrote that, quote, "The youth gets together his materials to build a bridge to the moon, or perchance a palace or temple on the earth, and, at length, the middle-aged man concludes to build a woodshed with them." But what happens when even a mere woodshed seems beyond the fevered dreams of the country's young? With youth political dissatisfaction at an all-time high, an election just waiting for these same youngsters to deliver a decisive condemnation of a system they feel has left them behind, which way will they jump at the ballot box if they show up at all? And perhaps it's time to ask whether America's youth really sees a point in taking part in an election that, regardless of the outcome, they feel is keeping them from further and further from the all-important American dream. Now, all these questions and more on today's edition of Liberty Nation Radio. We'll be talking polling of young voters, the barriers to entry of the Great Society, why Joe Biden's social media strategy is falling flat, and whether education in its modern form is even really worth the price of admission. It's set to be an epic show that delves deep and takes no prisoners. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. We'll be joined by Liberty Nation's executive editor, Lisa K. Donna, political columnist, Joe Schaefer, and as always, we'll be talking liberty with Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. It's going to be quite the show, so let's buckle up and dive right in. Ronald Reagan once said freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And what will this next generation bring? We're very fortunate to have with us today on Liberty Nation Radio, Liberty Nation's executive editor, Lisa K. Donna, who has written extensively on what's happening with the youth vote in America today. Welcome aboard, Lisa.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here on LN Radio with you.
Well, it's great to have you. Now, people should, if they get the opportunity, and they really should make this opportunity, jump over to the page of LibertyNation.com and check out all of these articles, because there's such a huge amount of data about what's happening with this young demographic, this key demographic leading up to the 2024 election in November. Do you care to give us the cliff notes?
Well, it's funny just hearing you say key, because in 2016, 2020, young people's presence were made known. Before that, it was, every year they'd say, this is the year the young people are going to make a difference. And it wouldn't. But especially in 2020, I think the pandemic really, the mail-in votes made the difference. And it was easy. They weren't at college. They weren't away from home. They could, get their ballot and mail it right in. And just a ton of young people voted. And 75% of them or 80% of them voted for Biden. And today, I was looking at the statistics, and according to the latest polls, Trump and Biden are neck and neck with young people.
That's got to be a worrying sign for Joe Biden, and a message of hope for Donald Trump. I think that the fact that the youth of America are moving towards his platform rather than the traditional base, because there's that old saying, isn't there? If you're not a socialist when you're young, you have no heart. If you're still one when you're older, you have no brain.
Right.
I think that's quite
right.
a well thing. So you expect some kind of rebellious spirit amongst the young voters. You expect this, but perhaps before, being rebellious was voting for Bill Clinton. It was voting for Barack Obama. But now it seems, and I think I might have the right of this, that Joe Biden is pretty much as establishment as you can get. So the rebellion of the young, which is, it's something that comes about every generation, there's the rebellion of the young. That would be more to vote for the person that the mainstream media is not telling you to vote for. That would be for the one who people are warning that this will be the destruction of democracy. And I think if one thing has become apparent, it's that the youth of America are not set on maintaining the status quo.
Well, there's a couple of things to notice about young people's votes. First of all, they're the people that largely are part of the burgeoning independent class. Understand what I'm saying? So they're the ones that are going out and registering as independents. So what you have here is you have young people registering as independents. They're not beholden to the left. They're not beholden to the right. So this doesn't mean that Trump has really picked up the whole youth vote, but he's gaining, and there is a shift. I have a 23-year-old friend who was always, in the left camp. As you were saying, the young tend to trend left. Well, I was talking to her the other day, and she said, I've had it with the left. I'm now a conservative. I'm dyed-in-the-wool conservative. I said, what did it for you? And she said, what did it for me was October 7th. I thought we were going to all come together, and now I see all this stuff, and I was thinking to myself, what is it that they hate about Donald Trump? And I started looking him up, and she said, I didn't find his policies to be problematic. In fact, I found that they were good, and she appreciated them now that she's been, living with inflation and stuff like that for 3.5 years.
Well, there's a really important point there, isn't there? Because there'll be some people who voted for the first time for Joe Biden, and there'll be other people who are voting for the first time this November in 2024. And so they'll have achieved their adulthood during this period, and the majority of which since Joe Biden took office. And so what you have is these youngsters, they've maybe cast their first vote, and that was for Joe Biden. And what they've seen is pretty much everything get worse. And, let's not lay the entire blame at the feet of Joe Biden for this. There's a lot of global issues that have added to this. But they've seen their conditions, the state of the economy, the state of the nation, essentially what a lot of people used to call a managed decline.
Right.
And so if that was their first experience, they think, well, I made this decision and what I got was a decline. At the very least, they're going to think twice about making that same decision again. If they're thinking, of course, they might think that there's the more radical view that might think, well, this will continue and destroy the system that isn't serving me well, and then something better will arise from the ashes like a phoenix. But I think that's a tiny minority. But those who have voted in 2020, I think there's a lot of buyer's regret there among the young, and they can, it's not as though they can blame themselves. They can't say, I've spent 20 years voting for this one party and this is what I got. But they're at a point where, well, I've tried it this way, now I can try it this way. I think that's what we're seeing to really create the leveling in the opinion polling that you were talking about.
Right. So I did a story yesterday on TikTok and how the campaigns are blitzkrieging TikTok. Now, this is interesting. Biden's been on there for a while. He's got 355,000 people. That sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Trump goes on there, and he's got 5 million in 3 days. Now here we are, a week later, he's got 6 million. It's just, there's some kind of mojo going on with young people in Trump.
It's funny, right? If you look at the videos and the content that people are putting out, I don't think that it's entirely that, well, they're getting dissatisfied with Joe Biden and more towards Trump. I think it's that Trump just puts out better content. It's more entertaining. The guy's a stand-up comedian when he's on stage. Right. He's funny. I mean,
he's more entertaining, and I think he captures the young people's interest, that kind of thing.
Yeah, whereas the content on TikTok is essentially, for the Biden campaign, it's essentially the same content that they've put cross-platform, which is very good for efficiencies because it means you don't have to redo something else for each individual social media platform. But it doesn't take into account the different demographics of the user base in those platforms.
Well, let me just add one thing. I talked about the young people becoming independents, but also young people in this day and age are less white and more diverse than they were, say, when I was in my 20s or you were in your 20s. You understand?
Yeah.
So if he's losing with Hispanics, you can see there's a kind of a crossover point where he loses with Hispanics and then he loses with young people because the young people are more diverse.
That's a point we're going to pick up on when we come back after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.